Hi guys, I am Hannah McQueen for those who don't know me. I'm about to give you a webinar for the next kind of 30 minutes or so. I'm going to take some questions at the end if you've got any. To pop in a question, you just need to go to the Q&A button below, type in your question and our producers will collate those and I'll answer those live at the end of today's session. We're going to be recording today's session as well, so if it gets glitchy, please fear not, we'll send you a recording. We've got a little bit to cover off. I'm going to get started in about 60 seconds. We've got a few hundred people joining us tonight, so we'll let them come in from the lobby, relax, and we'll move forward from there. So we're looking to get started in about 60 seconds. We're talking about mastering your mortgage to master your money, the last webinar for 2022. Really excited to be with you tonight and to give you what I hope is some insights that help you focus on what's important, block out the noise and get motivated to take control of what's needed over the next 12 months. I'll be getting started in about 30 seconds. There's just a few more people that are coming in. For those who have just arrived, we're going to be recording tonight's session. If you do have any questions, pop them in the Q&A button below and I'll do my very best to answer them. Everyone who isn't already a client of Enable Me will be welcomed to have an initial consultation following today's session as well. That will be discounted for those in attendance. Okay, master your mortgage, master your money. Tonight's presentation, it's general in nature. I'm going to give you the insights, some of the lessons that we've learned, some of the tricks that we apply, and some of the methodologies we believe in, but it's still general. It doesn't constitute specific financial advice. For specific financial advice, it's got to be tailored for your situation. So you'll get a lot of benefit from tonight, but please don't regard it as specific financial advice. We're going to be moving through a few things at pace, and the key points I want to convey to you is where are we at in the economic cycle? What's the impact of inflation? What's the impact of inaction? Mortgage rates, where are they expected to land? What are we expecting to happen over the next 12 months? How do you prepare for that? What about mortgage planning? For most of us, our mortgage costs are between 40 to 50% of our overall costs. So what do you do when you've got headwinds, uncomfortable headwinds? What's the difference between a strategic approach to your mortgage planning versus a tactical versus a value-based approach? Do you need a portion of some or all? And why your mindset matters when you are approaching headwinds. And as I said, I'll take some Q&A following that. So we've got a little bit that we want to cover off. But let's start with the reality. Inflation is at 7.2%. Our OCR is at 4.25%. For those who are coming off those beautifully low rates around the 2.5%, you're now fixing at 6%. That is uncomfortable for anyone. The impact of those mortgages falling due in the next 12 months is that you're going to be fixing for at least 6%. The cash impact, if your mortgage is around $600,000, is between $15,000 to $20,000 difference in mortgage payments each year. However you cut that, that is uncomfortable. If you, in addition to it being uncomfortable, if you do not have a history of a buffer or being able to save more than your income, it's not only going to feel uncomfortable, you're going to get the stitch. So we've got to get you ahead of that. I guess in trying to determine what the right strategy for you is going to depend on a few things. It's going to depend on the size of your surplus. That's the amount of money that you've got left over. If you don't have much money left over, then we've got to have a more tactical approach to how we are going to neutralize these higher interest rates. It's going to depend on whether you've got, whether you're on track for your own retirement savings, or is there a gap? If there's a gap, it's most likely you're going to need to reuse or repurpose some of the equity in your home. So that's got to come into how you think about how your mortgage is going to be structured. We need to think about if you have got investment properties, are those lending, the lending on those properties interest only, or is that interest only period coming to an end? We need to understand the tax deductibility on your investment properties, because all these things start to put downward pressure on your ability to move forward. The most important trump card you can have when it comes to trying to foster and cultivate financial success is forward momentum. And that forward momentum isn't reserved to the good times. Anyone can be good in the good times. It's what you do when you've got your headwinds, and are you still able to make progress during that time? And most of us can't. Most of us don't even make much progress in the good times, if I'm being honest. But when you're looking down kind of you're coming face to face with extra $20,000 of costs and possibly your income not increasing by the same extent, that's a pickle for anyone. So how do we respond to that? Well, firstly, we've got to have an appreciation of where these interest rates are going to go and the timing of when they're going to land there. Compare that to your own mortgage structure as it stands now to determine, do we do gradual or partial adjustments to your current mortgage, or do we rip the band-aid off and try and get ahead of these interest rates? And this is going to depend on the strength of your financial position as to what's going to be appropriate for you. But where we're expecting interest rates to go, we're expecting them to go into the mid-sixes, probably hit there. This is the short-term rates, the one-year rate, maybe even the 2-year rate, but specifically the 1-year rate. Will go early to mid-sixes. We're expecting it to stabilise in around July, possibly earlier, and then start to come down a smidge to hopefully rest more towards the mid-fives. It might take some months to get back to that point. But I guess if you're going to try and contain the risk, the challenge, the headwind, it's over the next 18 months, you need to be able to navigate that. And the best way to navigate a headwind is to first create your own tailwind and then learn how to catch the wind. Headwinds tend to present the best opportunities, but you've got to be ready for that. You've got to be light on your feet. You've got to be financially resilient, which is different than being mentally resilient. You've got to be able to weather the storm, right? You've got to feel comfortable that you can ride it out. And you've got to be really conscious of if you were to do nothing to your situation. So just take that kind of that laissez-faire approach. Where does that position you over the next 2 years? Now, if you are in your mid-50s and you've got a retirement gap, you can't afford to take a laissez-faire approach, because we're going to need to be aggressive during this time, not passive, because in not being aggressive, you increase the odds of you not being able to retire comfortably, right? So we're going toe to toe with the headwind. So I guess the key point that I want you to take from that is we are expecting the short-term rates to increase slightly more again. The long-term rates will continue to increase beyond possibly even that 7%. The floating rate will continue to increase. But what that means is that with your mortgages, you're fixing for short periods of time because we're trying to capture the lowest possible cost. There are exemptions to that. Obviously, if you're close to being mortgage free, it might pay to get certainty for a bit longer. But for the majority of us, that's not the case. I do think there's a possibility that the Reserve Bank have overcooked their correction to inflation with this last increase, definitely taking a counter view to the rest of the developed world who are actually slowing their response to inflation and getting a really good read on the economy. I think one of the reasons why the Reserve Bank have gone a little bit higher than what was expected is possibly to try and offset their own behaviours in the sense that up until this month, December, they are still giving money to banks at a heavily discounted rate that was applied in COVID, right? So on one hand, they are fueling the supply of money, which isn't good for inflation. And then they're trying to offset that with higher interest rates. What we can tell you is that 97% of Kiwis are worried about the cost of living. 83% are concerned about the impact of inflation. We know that 38% of Kiwis are on track to be mortgage-free by retirement, and everyone's retirement plan assumes that you will be mortgage-free by retirement. So if you're not on track, you're not part of that third or just over a third who are on track to achieve that in and of themselves, then you probably need to be working with us so we can accelerate that for you. We know that there are 1 million parents helping adult kids to survive financially, right? So it's a bit of a cluster. We can't change those results, I guess, on a global level, but we can bring it back to you and your situation, and how do we optimize your situation so we can maximize your momentum forward. It always comes back to you. Forget about the noise, the general comments, the articles, the noise. It comes back to what is the impact of these changes to your situation, and with the cards you have got to play, how do you play those in what order to maximize the chance of success? That's what it comes back to. We have to first understand, well, what is the impact of these interest rate changes to your situation? If you don't have a mortgage coming off in the next 12 to 18 months, you're probably going to be okay. Now, that isn't to say you shouldn't be strategic with how you structure your mortgage and whether you should be paying it off faster, but a lot of the noise that you're hearing at the moment just isn't relevant to you. So I guess the first thing we've got to do is curate all the noise to what do you need to be paying attention to, and what are the things that you can do now that's going to create the biggest impact for you. I mentioned earlier that when you are faced with a financial headwind, it is so important that you create your own tailwind to combat that. And when we're looking with our clients, we spend a lot of time doing this thinking for them, because if we do it right, it creates thousands of dollars of improvements each year, tens of thousands of dollars, in some instances, hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest save. It translates to our clients being mortgage-free in 8 years rather than 30 years. And it positions us to grow wealth, which is going to be the last piece to close out so that they can achieve that momentum. So when we're looking at creating a tailwind, we pay attention to 4 different areas. The first thing we pay attention to is there an opportunity to restructure your mortgage to lower your fixed costs? And that can be achieved a few ways, but usually it's if the term of your mortgage is less than 25 years, we are looking to extend the term out. And what that does is lower your fixed costs. Now that becomes important when your interest rate has increased significantly. We're trying to neutralize the impact of that higher interest rate. We're still trying to get you mortgage-free faster. We're just changing the way that we pay down that mortgage so that you have the control, the flexibility, the ability to absorb some of these punches from the economy. So we restructure your mortgage and we look to optimize it. So we're looking to do 2 things there: to reduce your monthly fixed costs as it relates to your mortgage so that that can offset the higher interest costs. And we optimize it so that we can pay the mortgage off as quickly as possible while still maintaining flexibility for you to be able to re-access the equity so that you could purchase or invest in something using the equity in your home should you need to or should you choose to. The main motivation for doing that is if you're trying to position yourself for retirement. But restructuring creates 30% of what's needed to neutralize these higher interest rates. And even if your mortgage isn't coming off in the next 12 months, we'd still be looking to do a partial restructure so that you have the benefit of faster debt repayment. On average, we try and get our clients mortgage-free in 8 to 10 years. And we measure that to get a kind of a rate, a gauge on what would be possible for you. We look at, in the general sense, of course, if we were meeting with you, we'd be able to tell you specifically. But we look at your household income after tax, and we look at the size of your mortgage, and we compare those 2 numbers as a ratio. So if your household income was $100,000 and your mortgage was $400,000, so that's a 1-to-4 ratio, we'd expect to get that ratio mortgage-free in 8 years. If your ratio was 1-to-5, so your household income was $100,000 and your mortgage was $500,000, we'd expect to get you mortgage-free in 10 years. So of course we need to understand your situation and give you specific advice, but that's the gist of what we would be aiming for based on our benchmark results for the thousands of clients that we've worked with. 30% of your tailwind comes from optimizing your mortgage and restructuring it. Now, when you're trying to extend the term of your mortgage, you often have to refinance your mortgage because your current bank is unlikely to roll over on that term. Now, refinance is an opportunity to canvass the entire market and determine which bank is going to be best for you based on the goals that you have to achieve. Now, some people tend to just look at the interest rates, but when most banks are offering similar interest rates, that's not really a deciding factor for us. We would be refinancing if we thought that we would be able to re-access more equity through moving to another bank, access more interest only if we've got investment properties, or remove a home from security if we were trying to do that. But the benefit of refinancing in the current market is the new bank contributes 1% of your total mortgage to you as a cash incentive. What's the impact of that? Well, that offsets almost 40% of the higher interest cost that is coming. So you can see that, well, we're going to do two things. We're going to refinance and use that cash incentive to, in effect, reduce the interest rate that you're going to be exposed to over the next 12 months. It also allows us an opportunity to restructure your mortgage. You can restructure by staying at your same bank, but you obviously don't get a cash incentive to stay at your same bank. But those two things account for at least 60%, but usually more than 70% of this higher interest rate cost. And these things aren't even linked to you emotionally. This is about doing it smarter with what you've got, being tactical with these things. That's where the majority of the tailwind's going to come from. But a good 30% is going to come from your cash flow management, getting you saving faster, getting a faster cadence on your saving, capturing the fritter, the money that goes walkabout. Most of our clients, especially, I mean, I've seen a few today, they were all similar, to be honest, because I described them all as comfortably inefficient. They haven't really had a reason to try. They've kind of always had enough money, but in the absence of not having a plan and some very clear goals that are tracked and measured with clear targets, in the absence of that, you tend to fritter between 15 to 20% of your income. So we want that because that's going to be the last piece that closes out how we neutralize the headwind. Right? And then how we jump ahead is we take the sum of those three things and we repurpose that so that you can leverage off your equity to start growing wealth more aggressively. That's what we want to do. And we bring all those things together and we want to do them all within the next 12 months. Hopefully I'm not scaring anyone. First step, maximize your cash surplus. The easiest way to do that is through 80% of your inefficiencies are found from your mortgage structure. It won't be structured the best way it can be to reduce your interest costs. Examples of inflated costs that are left unchecked in too many instances are your insurance payments. Most of us pay more than what we need for the cover that we should have. Our fixed costs tend to be a little bit inefficient. On average, there's about a 10% overspend because we just don't shop around for the discounts, possibly because we're too busy. And the rest of the inefficiencies tend to come from food. So that's 80% of where your money goes walkabout. These things aren't connected to your discretionary spend or your non-negotiables. These are things that are right in front of you that we are comfortably inefficient on day in, day out. And over the course of the year translates to tens of thousands of dollars. And over the course of a 10-year period, on average for Enable Me clients, is $1 million of difference that you've either left on the table or you have grabbed for yourself. So your cash flow is tight, super tight. You've got to be more tactical with your thinking. So that means that you don't have the luxury of not restructuring or not refinancing, because we need to try and neutralize the impact of these, what will feel like a curveball, kind of a punch to the guts. It's going to feel like that. And we need to get you ahead of that. Now, your mentality matters. And that means that you're going to be doing things, especially if you're working with Enable Me. We tend to zig when other people are zagging, or zag when they're zigging, because we're trying to get you ready to make some bold decisions and to be able to make those confidently, because we have spent time strengthening your foundation and we are showing you the examples of different decisions, the short, medium and long-term impact of doing nothing, doing something wrong, or bringing it home for the goal that we need to be kicking, right? And we're going to support you with whichever option you decide you would prefer to have. Anyone can be good on a good day. It is very difficult to be good on a bad day, but we're going to show you how we can strengthen that wealth mindset. Now, that is especially important for those who are in their 50s or 60s and they are approaching retirement and we have got a pickle. Pickle means we're not on track to, we haven't grown our wealth enough so that you can retire comfortably. So that means that in the next 2 years, you need to be making some really proactive decisions on how we're going to neutralize that. And you don't have the luxury of time. The impact of you waiting is that you won't be able to do anything, because the window of accessing leverage or the equity in your property starts to close very quickly once you're in your mid-50s. So we need to get you ahead of that. The impact of doing nothing on a $600,000 mortgage is that it's going to take you 30 years to pay off, and you're going to pay $694,000 in interest. Working with Enable Me, we would aim to get you mortgage free in 10 years. We tend to say that 10 is the new 30. We don't care if you stay with your bank or you move banks. We don't tend to like any bank, if I'm being honest. But if I can get you mortgage free in 10 years, that means you're only going to pay $198,000 in interest. In addition to that, that's going to save you $495,000 in interest that you were on track to pay to the bank if you continued with your default structure. So not only are we going to save that $600,000 so you can pay it off faster, but in paying it off faster, it's going to save you interest as well. And then not only is it saving you interest, but you're creating equity in your home, which we're going to repurpose for what comes next. So good. On average, we try and create $1 million worth of difference over a 10-year period when we're working with our clients. And that's the layering of saving more, paying your mortgage off faster, so saving interest, and putting that equity to work to purchase another property or another investment, and the gain on that investment that has been possible because of what you've unlocked down here. $1 million is on average the gap that we try and close. And we use the ratio of 1 to 1 to 10 to 23. Every $1 of money that you fritter, if we can find that, we put that against your mortgage, that will save you $1 in interest that you won't have to pay. It will also pay off your mortgage by $1, creating you $1 of equity. You're going to take that equity and buy another property and get the capital growth on that property, and the combined benefit of that is $10 for a $1 of effort. If you were left to your own devices, it would take you 23 years to pay. Let me put that a different way. If you're making, most of us have a mortgage of 30 years to start with, and in that month of that mortgage, you're making monthly repayments every month for the next 30 years. And if your interest rate didn't change, you'd be making the same monthly repayments every month for 30 years, but the portion of principal and interest is the bit that changes. To start with, you pay mostly interest and you pay a little fraction of principal, and then you start to pay slightly less interest or more principal. Now, I thought it would be at year 15 that you start paying more principal than interest of that monthly repayment, but it's not actually until year 23. So not only are you going to pay back to the bank what you borrowed and then another 1 to 2 times that amount in interest, you're going to actually pay that interest first, the majority. So we want to get you ahead of that. That's always been the case. But again, when there are headwinds, you can't afford to just accept that and be laissez-faire, right? We go toe to toe with that. It's about your household and what you're doing to pull your household away from the chaos. And that takes careful planning and deliberate action. If it was easy, our banks wouldn't be running at $2 billion profits every year, right? It's not the default. Okay. Headwinds is an opportunity to assess your mortgage plan. Most of us don't have a mortgage plan, so maybe it's an opportunity to get a mortgage plan. And as part of that plan, we need to understand, should I refinance or should I stay with my current bank? If I stay with my current bank, should I fix or should I float? If I fix, how long do I fix for? And do I look to break what I've got or a portion of what I've fixed and look to refix that at a different rate? How should I structure the rest of my mortgage? And how far should I be looking to pay off my mortgage? These are some of the questions we're going through when we're trying to design the mortgage plan for our clients. And the answer is different for different situations. What we're expecting the OCR to increase to around 5.5% by mid this year. It might, I think the inflation, whether right or wrong, I do think the inflation will be contained well within that period. And as soon as it's contained, you're going to see a few things. You're going to see the short-term rates start to stabilise and then start to reduce. You're going to see that even though the rates are reducing, the test rates might be still quite high. So it's going to get progressively harder to borrow more money. That is a problem if you've got a retirement gap. So we've got to get ahead of that if we can. I am expecting the LVR rules to loosen over the next 6 months. So it's going to be easier to access some of the equity in your property, but you need to make sure that you can service the borrowings. And remember, they're testing your ability to service at a much higher rate than what we are already going to be exposed to. So we just want to work through those things. The high risk period is the next 12 months. We know the extent of the risk. We can contain that. We've got a plan to get you ahead in spite of that, and also to be growing wealth in spite of that. Because what is the thing that comes immediately after a recession? Growth. And if you look at the economic cycle, because this is what the Reserve Bank has indicated, that will go into a technical recession for 12 months, which is great, right? Because the technical recession is still at full employment, so no one's losing their jobs, so it's not really a recession from the emotional language that a recession tends to ignite inside of you. It's a technical recession where the GDP is not growing at the rate that it should. I don't think any of us feel differently if it's growing at the rate that it should or if it's not. Most of us don't even feel that. We're going to feel the pinch of it, having slightly higher interest rates over the next 6 months and then those coming down. You've got to be able to navigate that. Don't be scared of it. Just understand how we're going to navigate that. So, with all our clients, now's a really good time to determine, does it make sense to stay with your bank? Or should we be canvassing the market to understand all lending options? Now, sometimes you might be moving, even though you haven't fixed, even though you might be in a fixed mortgage or a fixed interest rate right now. So if you're going to do that, there needs to be a reason to do that. And we need to be really careful with our thinking. So we need to do break cost analysis. Now, break cost analysis is when you're measuring the delta, the difference in the interest rate that you're on versus the interest rate that you're going to, and the cost of moving to unlock that interest rate and the benefit of moving. And depending on your situation, depending on what's offered, for some people, it's going to make sense to break a portion of their mortgage, but to stay put. And for others, it's going to make more sense to break the entire mortgage and move sooner rather than later. What's right for you is something that we would need to determine and analyse. But to give you an example, for the Enable Me clients, we've just over the last week, we've started pulling all the data of mortgages that are coming off in the next 12 months to understand, is it going to make more sense to break these mortgages earlier and be more proactive with our mortgage planning to offset or neutralise the impact of these higher interest rates? It's going to depend on your particular situation. Your cash flow is tight, and we measure that. If you're unable to save 20% of your net income, then your cash flow is tight. So for a tight situation, we've got to be more tactical. You would be considering breaking your mortgage much earlier than, like say, if you had a mortgage that was coming off perhaps in 6 months' time, we would be looking to break that, because I would be nervous that you're going to be exposed to a rate you can't absorb in 6 months' time. We'd be wanting to refinance you because we'd be wanting to receive a 1% interest rate kind of cash back, or to offset that interest rate. We'd consider going on KiwiSaver holidays, deferring big costs, fixing for shorter terms. We always look at the difference between 1, 2 and 3 year rates. And in normal times, which we haven't really been in normal times for about 3 years, to be honest, but prior to COVID, we'd be looking to fix up to 3 years for most of our clients, a portion of the mortgage on 1 year, another portion on 2 years, and another portion on 3 years. We are not doing that in the current environment, because when we model out the rates that we're expecting to be in 12 months time versus the 2-year rate that is on offer now, normally the difference between 1 and 2 year rate isn't strong enough to encourage us to fix for more than 1 year. There's an algorithm to work out when it makes sense to fix for more than 1 year or not, based on the delta between those different rates. So that, again, we're trying to analyze this for our clients, because in some situations the difference could be a few $1,000s a year that you're exposing yourself to, either unnecessarily or prematurely, right? So that's something that, if your situation is tight, you don't have the luxury of being inefficient here. We've actually got to work through all the different scenarios. Now, headwinds are one of the better times to grow wealth, which kind of feels a bit weird, but it is. So the question we've got to ask is, do you want to grow wealth in the next 12 months? Do you need to? If you do, because usually motivated by your retirement gap being too small, sometimes motivated by you just wanting to maximize what you've got. Both of those are legitimate reasons to try harder. And I personally think that everyone should have a wealth goal, whether it's based around retirement or not, because it's good for the soul. It focuses you and it rewards effort. And from a mentality perspective, it's how you strengthen a wealth mindset. But if you do need to grow, when there are headwinds, we have to consider, do you need to grow wealth in the next 12 months? And what is the role of lending and for you to try and unlock that wealth? Now, some clients don't need to use leverage to grow wealth. They've got enough cash. They just need to invest it differently. Or they've got properties, they might just need to replace them. But if there is a chance that you've got a retirement gap, then it's most likely you are going to need to use leverage. And that's something we've got to be really mindful of when we're trying to determine your mortgage strategy. We're trying to understand, if there was a need to create wealth, will that put pressure on your cash flow? If you are borrowing to purchase an investment property, you often need to top up that investment property. Well, that's a cash cost. We need to make sure you've got enough fat in your surplus to absorb that. We want to consider, should we be refinancing now? If your interest only term is about to expire, does it make sense to refinance you to negotiate another 5 years of interest only? How far away is retirement? How big is your window to do something about it? You might not be retiring for another 5 years, but your window to close your retirement gap is only for the next 18 months. We have to understand this information as it relates to you, because it's going to impact the way we think about solving the problem. And inflation and debt are one of the best combinations you can have. I know that sounds weird, right? But if you had money sitting in the bank and we've got a 7% interest rate, so let's say you've got $100,000 sitting in the bank and we've got a 7% inflation rate, beg your pardon. At the end of the year, that saving would buy you $93,000 of goods, right? So the value of that money has reduced by 7%, or the size of the inflation. Yeah. The inverse is true, or the same is true, but in the positive, for debt. If you had $100,000 of debt and we have inflation of 7%, at the end of the year, that debt is now worth $93,000, right? So the value of debt is reducing over time. So high inflation, if you can afford to service the debt, high inflation is a beautiful marriage for debt, because it's creating equity each year for you simply by reducing the value of your borrowings. Or if you're nervous about movements in the market, I'm not nervous about movements in the property market, but I know that some people are. The reason I'm not is I buy the right property. I never try and pick the market. I buy the right property for my strategy, and I have a hold strategy to get through and make sure I sell at the right time. Not buy at the right time, sell at the right time. A lot of people are nervous to buy now. and some of that's to do with experience. I understand that. But what they don't understand, the impact of not buying now, is that they might not be able to buy at all if their window is closing. Nor do you want to expose yourself to higher interest rates, or as the test rate continues to increase, the amount that you can access starts to reduce. So there is an opportunity cost to not taking action at the right time. But what I can say about inflation and debt is one of the most beautiful things there are. Because what happens is that your income keeps increasing, even though the value of the debt stays the same. So asset prices go up because of inflation, rents go up, salaries go up because of inflation, but the value of your debt is reducing relative to inflation. Love it. The headwinds require careful planning. So if you're buying an investment property, make sure you've got the right property criteria, which means that you are selecting properties where the yield is in the 4 to 5%, which is tricky to find. It's in a region that's going to give you the capital growth you need to close out your retirement gap within the time frame that you need to close it out. You're specific about the types of property, the age of the property, the tax deductibility, and you've got the right hold strategy in place. There is no point buying any old property. That is a waste of time. There is no point buying a good property and not having the hold strategy for you to be able to navigate through the next few years. But what we do know is that once we pass through a recession, which the Reserve Bank governor has suggested that will start in July and go for 12 months' time, on the other side of that recession is the economic growth, or the uptick we're wanting in capital growth. And that's what we are trying to position you for. That is more important than the timing of when you enter the market. So I'm going to take some questions in a second if you have got any questions, and you just pop them in the Q&A. Key takeaways: in the next 12 months, you're going to have higher living costs. So we need to offset that with tactical mortgage planning, income planning, and cash flow management. If your retirement is within 10 years, you need to focus on growing wealth and mortgage planning. The longer you delay, the less chance the bank will lend you money and the more risk you will need to take to close that gap. Navigating headwinds requires a different mindset, and you usually need a little bit of help. In fact, you should be having help just to try and maximize your forward momentum, but to be able to maximize that momentum when there is a headwind is a specialty. We'll show you how to catch the wind, because that's a game changer. How we can help if you're not already working with us is we would diagnose your starting point and identify where you're going to land if you don't make any changes. We're going to assess your capability and design a plan to unlock your potential and to unlock your tailwind. We're going to design a strategy to grow wealth, to build your wealth faster, and to create forward momentum. We're going to stretch you to be better and to get your money working harder. Our coaches are qualified financial advisors. They're going to help design the plan, and then they're going to help you execute your plan. In spite of your tendencies, setbacks, and headwinds, they're going to increase the odds of you arriving at your destination in time with what you need. They'll build you a buffer so you can navigate the volatility of income, volatility of costs, and volatility of economic changes. They'll help you with the heavy lifting, and they're going to bring in specialists as needed. But they're going to hold you accountable to what you are capable of doing if you had everything structured correctly. For those who haven't had a consultation, you can redeem a consultation if you book it before the 16th of December. The cost is normally $350 plus GST. It's discounted to $250 plus GST. You don't need to have your session before December. You just need to have booked a session maybe for the new year. Now, I'm going to take some Q&As. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you.
We've had a few questions come through throughout the course and quite a few come through at the end, so we'll try to get to all of them. The first one we have, Hannah, is in retirement, is it best to withdraw your whole KiwiSaver?
Pretty hard question to answer. It depends on the size of your KiwiSaver, and it depends on the other options you've got available to you. For example, we had a client last week where it made sense to withdraw all of it, and I had a client yesterday where it made sense to withdraw none of it. So I guess we've got to understand what the KiwiSaver is going to be used for. Is it supplementing living costs? Is it going to be invested in something else? Is it to cover one-off costs? Depending on those answers, we would have, depending on the answer to those questions, we would have a different response to what's best. We are open to cashing in KiwiSaver if we believe it's going to serve you better overall.
Awesome, thank you, Hannah. And someone's asked, paying debt faster can reduce equity to buying new investment property. Could you please provide some words on this matter and kind of what you meant?
Can you say the question again?
Sure thing. Paying debt faster can reduce equity to buy new investment property.
Okay, so yeah, I think the question wasn't asked quite correctly. So when you pay off debt faster on your home loan, it increases your equity. It doesn't reduce your equity. It increases your equity, and you're able to borrow against that equity to put the deposit you need to purchase an investment property. So let me give you an example on that. An example is probably easier than words. Let's say that your home's worth $800,000. Already I'm nervous thinking I'm going to need a calculator in a second. And your mortgage is okay, I'm going to change that. Let's say your home's worth $1 million and your mortgage is $400,000 on your home. The difference between the value of your property and your mortgage is the size of your equity. As we pay down your mortgage, we create more equity. Now, the banks are prepared to lend up to 80% of the value of your home. So if it was $1 million property, they would lend you up to $800,000. Now, of course, you've already borrowed $400,000 for your home. So that suggests you've got $400,000 of workable equity that you could access as a deposit for an investment property. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, but that's the gist. Obviously, you have to be able to prove that you can service that level of borrowing, and they're testing you at a really aggressive rate with really aggressive terms. But if you can borrow, if we can get that structured correctly, and we might need to move banks so that you can unlock more equity, more usable equity. But if we can access some of that, that becomes the deposit for an investment property. Now that property, you need to, for a new property, you need to have a 20% deposit. So let's say of that $400,000 we had available to us as usable equity, we use $160,000 as our 20% deposit. So that would allow us to buy an $800,000 property. And we would go to another bank and say, well, we want to buy this $800,000 property here. We want you to lend us 80% of its value, and we're going to give you 20% or the deposit using the equity in our home. And so in effect, the investment property is 100% leveraged using the equity on your home and the value of the investment property. Now, that I've kind of bastardized that whole process, but that's the gist. So then the question is, if we can get you mortgage free faster, we're increasing that equity faster. Not only that, we're reducing your mortgage so that the mortgage costs that the bank are using to test what you can afford is starting to lower, so you can arguably service more. So that's why we focus so much on getting your cash management working really hard, and we focus on getting you mortgage free much faster. It creates a buffer for you, it builds your financial resilience, but it unlocks equity we can then build on, and your ability to access more equity because you've reduced your fixed costs. So it's kind of this beautiful web of opportunity if you execute it elegantly.
Awesome, great answer, thank you, Hannah. We've had another question here. I have a $200,000 deposit and only want to borrow $200,000. Can I get a loan or must I go for a mortgage?
If you are wanting to borrow $200,000, you would go for a mortgage because the interest rate, you say, yes, you can get a loan. And if you're going to use $200,000 as the security of that loan, you'll be able to secure that somehow. But you would be best to secure it through a mortgage because that would be the lowest cost, the lowest way to fund $200,000 of borrowings. So you would get a mortgage because it serves you better, not because we have a view on whether you should have a mortgage or not.
Awesome, thank you, Hannah. And is it better to pay more off your mortgage by making extra payments or to reduce the term? Sorry if you've already answered this. They joined the webinar late.
We would do neither, to be honest. We never want to reduce the term on any mortgage, hands down. And the reason for that is it will jeopardize your ability to access any more lending if you needed to secure more lending for something else. So it comes at a really high cost, you shortening your term, which is weird, right? Because you would think shortening your term is showing initiative. So how could that work against you? But it does. It works against your future ability to borrow. It also is backing you into a corner because you are committing to that reduced term for a period of time. And if your situation changes and you have to extend that term, that can trigger a break cost. So you've given up your flexibility and you've exposed yourself to a higher cost in the event something happens that you can't control. Now, what I know about life is the worst things happen at the worst time, usually, or opportunity presents itself at the most inopportune time. Things don't happen when it would be really elegant or nice to happen. They just happen when they happen. And so I think flexibility is possibly one of your biggest assets that you can have with regards to your mortgage structure. What we do at Enable Me is we maximize the term. We have a strategy where we are paying your mortgage off faster. We're funneling that through either an offset or a revolving credit facility, depending on if you're a shopper or a saver. There are different benefits depending on your money tendencies. And when you're trying to maximize surplus, you have got to listen to those tendencies. There is no point you're pretending you're going to be something that you're not. That wastes time and it creates friction. And basic physics says the more momentum you're going to get is going to be achieved based on the least amount of friction, right? So we get that. But we've got to be clever because what we know is that a revolving credit facility is on a floating interest rate, which is on a slightly higher rate, normally 1 to 2% higher than a fixed rate. So if we're going to expose you to that cost, we need to know we're going to be saving you more than that higher cost. And that's the optimization process that we go through. So we don't want you to make lump sum payments on your mortgage because you can't re-access that money. And when you're trying to plan for the next 5 to 10 years, you need to be able to access any of your equity at any particular point because life throws opportunities to you at the wrong time. And unless you are ready, have the flexibility to absorb them, the opportunity passes you by. We don't want to, so lump sum payments is a no-no unless it's channeled through a revolving credit facility. We don't want you having a revolving credit facility unless you've got a cash surplus, and the amount of that cash surplus has a relationship to the size of the revolving credit facility. You're exposing yourself to a higher cost, so it needs to be offset with momentum to pay that down. And I'm not comfortable encouraging anyone to do that unless they're working with Enable Me, because by and large, in 95% of the instances, you just incur a higher cost. So a waste of time. And we don't shorten terms because that impacts your ability to do something else in the future.
Awesome, thank you, Hannah. And if you have a surplus cash flow for investment lending, should you be paying that into lending at this time, or would this be inefficient considering growth in the horizon is medium term?
We tend to do both for clients, to be honest. So we tend to put that money against their home debt because that debt's not tax efficient. It's unproductive debt, but that creates equity that we then borrow against to do something else with. So I'm all about trying to unlock or layer up as many opportunities as possible from that one move. So we're trying to maximize the return for that effort. So if you were my client, I would, whatever you're saving, I'll try and save more. I'll show you how you're going to save more. I'm going to try and pay your mortgage off faster because that serves me as it reduces my retirement gap and positions me to be able to use your equity to do something to close the difference in your retirement gap. Yeah, so we'll try and layer those things up rather than doing one over the other.
Awesome. And if we are building a new house next year, is there any point even looking at our mortgage and loan structure now? Or are we kind of having to wait until the end of the year to build and assess the situation?
The mortgage, no, but your cash management, yes, because you're going to be exposed to the floating interest rate, usually through a construction loan. So you have got an overexposure to the risks over the next 12 months, and you can't do much about that as it relates to your mortgage. But what you can do about that, there are two other things that you can do, is we can maximize your savings in the meantime so you can absorb those higher interest rates. We can get a sense of, does it make sense to be with your bank long term or short term and prepare you to move you once that home is complete. And we can also be building wealth while you're trying to complete the build on your home. So there's a part of the plan that you've kind of got your hands tied, but that doesn't mean you do nothing. That just means the parts of the plan you can work on, you lean into, and you've got to, because you're exposed to a greater proportion of risk than most situations.
Awesome, thank you, Hannah. We're going to wrap up with one final question tonight. Can I purchase a consultation as a Christmas gift?
Yes, you can. I'm not entirely sure how you do it, but yes, you can. So just pop to enable.me and on this tab here, /mortgage, and the team will be in touch with you if that's your preference. Look, thank you very much for having me. I hope you enjoyed tonight's session. Just remember, a little bit of a headwind's not a problem, provided you're creating your own tailwind. Let's be really deliberate. Let's not worry about the noise. Let's worry about the impact to your situation and what you're going to do about it. And most importantly, let's learn how to catch the wind. Thank you very much for having me. Merry Christmas.